still, as a follower of Jesus, I'm still to be marked by love.
David kind of gave us a glimpse of that. He said, I'm never going to give anything to God that isn't of value.
There probably are people who would love for God to speak to them. Are you ready to hear what he has to say?
I mean, like, I physically had to say, okay, and open up my hands and say, what do you want to do here?
But I think doing life with one another isn't just showing up at a coffee shop, going through a book and talking about it and going home.
Well, welcome back to Radio Inflections. My name is Josh Herrema, one of your hosts, and I am joined today by a guest, a gentleman from our community here in Sturgis. I am joined by John Dresser. John, you want to introduce yourself to all the ladies and gentlemen that are listening or watching us today?
Josh, be happy to.
That's all right.
So thank you, first of all, for this opportunity. It's kind of exciting, and it's going to be fun. Yes, I'm John Dresser. Many generation lawyer, business owner, contributor to our wonderful community, and I specialize in business and estate planning and estate administration and death and dying issues. So I'm looking forward to getting into a discussion with you on some of those topics and giving some food for thought for those that take the time to look at this podcast in the future.
No, that's good. So for those of you that have been with us on Radio Reflections, we are in our series all about death and dying. So when we had the opportunity to sit down and chat with John, I thought, well, this is great. And in a sense, looking at the stewardship aspect of death, which is maybe not a topic that a lot of people think about all the time. When they think, oh, hey, death and dying, that might not be the first thing that pops into their mind.
No, normally that's something where you have to peel back some of the onion skin to get them to that perspective and that thought process.
So for those that are listening or watching, they're like, well, what is estate planning even? Just unpack that a little bit for us. What exactly does that mean? In
a broader brush stroke, I would say that is it's the undertaking and effort that a person, or maybe it's a husband and wife, we'll leave it at that undertakes to, they've built up assets during their lifetime, and they have goals and objectives on where the assets should go when they are either disabled but still living, but more importantly when they are no longer treading on earth. And it's the process of developing a strategy to meet their objectives and implementing that strategy into documents that reflect their wishes and their desires.
So then when they come to that point of dying, or you mentioned even being disabled, it's not kind of an arbitrary, I wonder what John would have wanted to do with his his assets. You kind of avoid that.
You definitely do, and it is, people work hard for their worldly possessions, and they have all different thoughts on who should get those and why people should get them. Many times I will hear, I've paid enough taxes to the United States, and in our case, the state of Michigan, and I really don't want those governments to get any more of the fruits of my bounty. So it is clearly about putting yourself in control of your assets by way of clear documentation saying that whoever is serving for you as a personal representative under a will or a trustee under a trust, this is how I want my affairs to be handled and my assets to be distributed. And you follow that clearly and carefully.
Okay, which leads, and maybe we're jumping ahead a little bit, but so dig into that. Said, hey, we don't want the state to get this. Let's say I don't do any estate planning, like I just, but I get hit by a bus, right? Like where does my stuff go? Who handles that? Like how is all of that processed? Again, if I walk out tomorrow and die without that in place.
Well, fortunately, we don't have the proverbial bus here in Sturgis, but I understand. I understand your point. So, in all seriousness, after the grieving process is initiated by your wife, then she would want to go to someone who is qualified in a lawyer that's qualified in estate administration. Because if you have assets that are solely in your name, and I don't mean something like a life insurance policy that would have a designated beneficiary, or a retirement plan that would have a beneficiary. Mm-hmm. You have many things of real value that just happen to be titled in your name. Those assets are going to go through probate. And if a person dies without a will, back in the long time ago when the Pilgrims came from England, they brought English common law. And part of English common law is something called intestate succession. Intestate succession has been relevant under American state law, forever. And it is part of our statute. It's part of the governing law, which governs estate administration in Michigan. And it would say, my family is going to get part of it. If I have parents that are living, they will get part of it. And it may even drop down to a generation below or equal to, so cousins or aunts and uncles might get part of it. And you just did that's an interesting kind of predicament. A beneficiary may be someone that you just don't get along with for whatever reason. But because the fact that someone did not plan, the law takes over and tells the family how the assets are to be distributed. Mm-hmm. So that reinforces a very strong theory that I have is, no one likes to talk about death and dying, but it's all part of what we live with. And proper planning prevents unforeseen and unintended consequences to the surviving spouse, the family, and the assets that are involved.
No, that makes sense. I did not know that. I like all of my cousins. If any of my cousins are listening or watching, you guys are all cool. But yeah, I would not have thought that they would have anything to do with any of my stuff if I got hit by that bus. I wouldn't have even thought that they factored into the equation.
That's true.
That is really interesting. So I don't know if you guys knew that out there or not, but there you go, a little nugget for you. So what are some of the other dangers of not planning well? You talk about unintended consequences, that in my case, my wife would have to now deal with. What are some of the other dangers of not planning well when it comes to your estate?
If someone has resources and tagging along with what we just talked about, a younger adult, so adult by definition is 18 years of age. So that person, because of the unfortunate circumstances of someone dying, becomes part of the estate, but they don't know how to handle resources and they don't know how to handle money. So a portion of the decedent's estate ends up in their hands, and they're left with the inability to handle it. Another example would be if a family has we'll say a child that has challenges, and it could be alcohol related, it could be drug related, or more importantly, they have special needs,
like a physical or
mental cognitive disabilities, and they may already be on some kind of assistance program. Well, if you don't plan properly, they may get assets which would disqualify them for the long-term assistance that they're counting on and they're used to. So they may get an immediate benefit, but then in the long run be left out in the cold.
Oh, that's crazy. So,
and I would also say in the planning process, you get the ability to select who you want to serve when you're no longer here to carry out the terms of either your will or trust. And we could probably talk for 2 hours on how you select a trustee and the importance of that. But that's not our purpose today, and I'm not going to bore anybody with those details.
Well, okay. Well, let's not take 2 hours. But I mean, what's the 2-minute version? I mean, just if somebody is like, I've never even thought about this. Like, what's the 2-minute version of kind of like a key thing to look for when picking a trustee?
I'm gonna use your situation. Younger with a family. So one thing that would be important in the event that something happened to both of you would be the nomination of a guardian for your minor children, and then a trustee to manage the assets that you have left in trust for the kids' benefit until they reach a specified age. And so you want someone that's knowledgeable in business and in investing. There are any number of legal duties, legal being that they're imposed by statute on a trustee. So it's a tough job. I think one of the most important things is someone that you trust, someone that's gonna look at what either they're dealt with because you didn't have a document in place, or if you did, carrying out the specific terms of that rather than saying, well, I know Josh. I mean, he didn't really mean that.
That's right. He would have wanted. He would have wanted me to have a little bit of this.
Sure. It's just so.
So you talked about some of the dangers of not planning well for assets and resources. Speak into my situation. So again, I've got all of my kids are minors. In the event we don't have a guardian lined up, so for families that are listening, they don't have a guardian lined up. What happens if both parents pass away? Who handles the kids? Where do the kids go? What's the process for that?
Well, I think probably sadly in the very short term, they could be separated. They could be together in one home until the proverbial dust settles. But without that nomination in place, in writing, then we always revert back to the law, and the statute on the guardian appointment will tell you who has priority. And just because they have priority under the law's eyes does not mean that they are necessarily the most appropriate caregiver and mom and dad substitute for, in your case, if you and your wife are gone.
Right, and then now crazy Uncle Eddie takes over.
Yeah.
And we're like, why in the world did they give the kids to crazy Uncle Eddie? You know, I'm curious. What are some of the things that, and I don't know if this falls under the things that you do, but in a case like that, what are the things that they use to determine who the kids go to? Do they just say, well, hey, crazy Uncle Eddie's, he has assets and resources, he'll be able to provide for these kids?
A lot of times you have the ability of, so in this situation, let's assume that we now have a matter pending before the court because both of you were deceased, so we had to open up an estate, and then we're asking the court to appoint a guardian. Depending on the age of the kids, they can go in and talk to the judge, in our case, into his office, and express to him what their desires are. Other than that, then you look at the universe of family members, and you would really hope that somebody would raise their hand and step up and say, I will take care of these lovelies, and that they have the qualifications of being good stewards, being good parents, being responsible with money, will do the right things, will educate the children properly, will take care of their health needs. Now, those are some of the factors that you look at.
Okay. No, that's good. That's good. So what are some of the, you interact with people on a regular basis about these things. What are some of the top questions people ask you? And maybe we've hit on a couple, I don't know. We'll see how well my questions line up. But what are some of the top questions that you get asked when it comes to estate planning?
There are humble people that come in, and I'm using that term with humility, and they'll joke around a little bit, and they'll say, I'm not rich. I don't think I need a trust. And I will fire back and say, a trust is a way that you can plan and avoid probate. And I'm not saying that probate's bad. There are all sorts of horror stories that people think that the court takes a big chunk of the estate, and that's not true, and it takes a long time. That's not because of the court. It's because of issues that are going on in the estate. But I like a trust because it's private. It doesn't have to be filed anywhere. The only people that know about it are the lawyer and the client, unless the client tells the lawyer specifically that you can talk to somebody else about it. And that person that I'm referring to, they may want to give some money to a beneficiary that has some challenges. So give it to them so they get the benefit of it, but not give it to them so that they take it and just spend it willy-nilly. They always ask about cost.
Oh,
Always. And
just about the cost of getting to the point where you have all of this in place.
Yes.
Okay.
What's the cost of putting these documents together. How quickly can you do it? And I give them, depending on the situation, if I give them options on how they can pay for it. And from a timing standpoint, it is, we start with what I need, and then it's on them to get the information back. So that's sometimes that slows things down.
Okay.
Sometimes people will ask, is this private? Because we live in a small town, and I said, absolutely, it's private. It is. It's confidential, and the only people that will know about it will be the lawyer and the client, unless the client tells somebody.
Right. Now, real quick, I want to bounce back. I'm sure there's a lot of variance. Like you said, 'cause probably estates of all different sizes, all different facets. Is there like a ballpark? Because you got me curious now. If I come in and, hey, like I want to make sure I've got a guardian for my kids, I've got, just a couple of assets that I want to make sure, are squared away. Like, is there like a ballpark cost? Because there might be people out there that are like, I have no idea. Like, yeah, what does this? Like, I don't even. Is this going to be $10,000? Is this going to be, $100,000? Is there like a ballpark cost to the process?
The numbers that you just threw out of 10 to 100,000 would be for planning would be most unusual around here. Those kind of numbers are families that have multiple assets and multiple businesses and
bajillionaires kind of thing.
They're God's been very blessed to them. But in a non-taxable state, and I'm referring to the federal estate tax, which that limit of right now is about $11.5 million for you and I and any other individuals. President Biden would like to see that reduced to at least $3.5 million. So if we don't have a taxable estate and we're doing the planning, which would normally be wills, either one trust or maybe two trusts for husband and wife, durable powers of attorney, what I call healthcare powers of attorney. They're advanced directives to deal with health issues at the end of life. Real estate transfers, a document called a funeral representative designation, where you can, in essence, script and plan out your funeral. That package, normally in a ballpark of $2,000.
Okay, cool. So that's good. Again, so if you're listening, if you're watching, that gives you some idea there. Again, and that would be on maybe through $11 million. That's a lot of dollars. I'm a long ways away from $11 million, so I wouldn't cross that threshold.
If we're talking about a taxable federal estate, then the number is going to be higher than $2 million.
Okay. All right. That'd be a big estate. But all right. So I totally sidetracked us back to that question. What are some of the other questions that people ask? As they're kind of exploring this topic.
Sometimes they'll ask, why do I need this? So we'll go into the story about planning and being in control of your situation and what happens if you don't, the intestate succession.
So talk a little bit, on that theme, there's a biblical principle is stewardship, right? This idea that everything we have is God's, right? And we're here to steward that, to take care of that. How might we connect those two things? The idea that we're called to be stewards and the idea of estate planning. Like, what do you see as the overlap?
When I use or think of stewardship, it is it can be protection of the bounties that God has blessed us with. Again, going back to just doing proper planning. It can also be if a client, a single person or husband and wife, usually around here, has a charitable intent. And that's easily determined by a few basic questions. Sometimes they might even bring it up themselves. How can we use some of their assets to benefit those organizations, charities, or churches or a combination of all of those to have a legacy? It can be, and there are a number of charitable planning techniques that from outright cash gifts to distribution of appreciated assets to an organization, either during life or at death. There are gift annuities. I don't think that we want to go into a laundry list of those techniques, but I think of stewardship that way, and also benefiting an organization that I truly love, and I being the client, through setting up an endowed fund. So they give money, it's entrusted to the organization, and the money is invested, and in foundation or endowment terms, we'll just say the income in a very broad brush is used for the benefit of the organization. So I'm not sure if that's really focused on your.
Well, no, I mean, really, if you take that and you look at the other pieces that you've brought here, when it comes to stewardship, you can say, hey, planning your estate well allows you to, even in death, to continue to invest in the things that God has laid on your heart.
Very much so.
Very much so. Yeah. So yeah, whether it's through charitable organizations, family. We're called to provide for our families. That's a biblical thing, right? So being able to do that, after I pass away, being able to, sow financially into organizations that I care about, have a passion for. Yeah, I think you tackled it.
And in a broader sense with the family, giving them a boost or a help to fulfill their goals and objectives without making it a disincentive for them to work hard and earn their way.
Well, and then so let's as I'm glancing at my timer here. We're getting close, but I do want to hit on this too, because I've seen over the years there are a handful of families that mom passes away, and then a few years later dad passed away. But these are the children in this case are adults, right? So you've got parents in their 80s or 90s, they pass away. And now you have children, adult children, and it rips the family apart as they try to like I should get this, and what you took the dresser, and I want whatever. Is that an effect of not planning well, or do you think does that kind of thing happen just because people are people? I don't know. Cause I was curious about that. Like, as we were,
I firmly believe it is. It's not planning well. It's not properly planning. Sometimes parents they're just so private that they don't want to talk about what they have with their family. I see the benefit of family meetings. And it wasn't all that long ago that I think there was a study from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. Yeah, now I'm talking boring stuff.
I like studies, so you're all right.
But from the generation of my parents down to my generation, there were trillions of dollars that are going to be passed in the next few years, and some families just are not capable of that, of not handling that, and you see it more and more and more. And I'll tell you, in the last year or so, with the impact of all of the stimulation that's going on in our lives, I've seen a gross uptick in that. Yeah, 50 years ago, you got the red scooter and I didn't, and I still remember that, and I harbor ill feelings towards you. Mm-hmm. So now that we have some resources to fight over and we've got some money, I'm going to litigate this. It's just horribly disruptive to family units. It makes me very sad.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've seen siblings they're almost literally at war with each other over, no, I want this. Why did you get this? That it's like, holy cow.
and let me just touch on that. Many times it's not necessarily the money. It's an item of tangible personal property that has value to two sibs. And so in planning, the client can leave a list and they can sign it and date it and says, I want this item to go to this person. I want another item to go to that person. And the personal representative or trustee has got to honor that. So that's another way of scripting out how you want things done to avoid problems. Mm-hmm. While we're on a little bit of a problem issue, in both wills and trusts in Michigan, you can add language that says, unless there's a valid, there's good cause and a valid legal reason. If you contest this document by filing some appropriate action in the probate court in the county where the client dies, if you do that, the court has the ability to make a determination that you, the combating person, died before me, meaning that you don't get anything. Mm-hmm. So it's not used in every situation, but in the right family matters, right family situation where and you get to know that by asking the right questions. If you think that there's going to be battles and wars waged after the person dies, it's probably a good thing to put that in there.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Now, and real quick, and I'll make this my last question, and it's bouncing back to an earlier one. When you talked about designating that trustee or that person, sometimes you'll see, again, elderly parents, they pass away, and one of their children is the executor. Is that the right word? Of the will.
The executor used to be, that's an older term.
Okay.
The contemporary term is personal representative under the will.
Okay. I'm looking for your personal opinion, maybe your professional opinion. Is it a good idea to have a family member as the personal representative or executive, if I want to use my old school term?
It is, so it's the story like this. The neighbor says, I just went through a divorce and everything worked out this way. And so your situation's going to work out the same way. Well, no two divorces are the same. No two planning situations, no two families are the same. And when I said going back to when I said about spending time talking about the selection of the fiduciary, personal representative, guardian, conservator, or trustee, that's where you dig into, is a family member the right choice? Or are you better off having two family members work together and draft language that essentially says they've got to get along? Or is it a situation where you need an outsider, an individual, or a bank or trust company to come in and carry out things? So it's Josh, it's not a one size fits all answer.
Okay. No, that's all right. That's all right. Well, hey, I think we're at about our time, but I do want to tell our viewers and listeners, we're exploring some options. John and I have chatted, just exploring some options to give you more information on this topic. Again, this is just kind of to whet your appetite, get you introduced to this topic. Again, within the context of death and dying, how can we be good stewards of what God has blessed us with? So yeah, keep your eyes and ears open for further opportunities to learn from John and just his experience in this field.
There are more things to come.
That's right. That's right. Well, John, I want to say thank you for coming and hanging out with us for this episode of the podcast.
It was a wonderful experience. Thank you for allowing me to be in the church lobby here.
This is good.
Very comfortable, and I had a great time.
Rock and roll. This is good. I look forward to what we're going to hopefully bring down the road here in the future. So right on. Well, hey, for those of you that are listening, watching, thanks for joining us. We would love it if you would rate, review, share, subscribe, throw this on your social media. This is, again, something that I think we could all learn from. So I want to encourage you to share this with those that are in your sphere of influence. And we will see you next time for Radiant Reflections.